future talks and stuff. Hopefully we've got some experiences to share on distributing our workloads all across the world. Today, we're primarily running out of US Central in GCP, which is in Council Bluffs, Iowa. Yeah. Click on it. So thought it would be important to kind of share some context on the size of the team here that manages our Google Cloud ecosystem. So we've got 4 cloud engineers, 5 site reliability engineers, 4 database engineers, and 1 architect, kind of focused on that group here. So that's my role. Thor is a principal cloud engineer as well. So he and the 3 others, it is 3 others, you're counted in that, kind of take on everything in our advancement. Yeah, go ahead.
You guys, can you give high-level definition or difference between cloud engineer and SRE?
Yeah, so from a cloud engineering perspective, the team that I'm on really focuses on the platform. So the infrastructure, how we're going to connect things, all the networking that goes along with it, the security pieces of it. And then like what types of platform we're going to use when a new service is possibly coming up. And then we act as the consultants on all those. On our SRE team, and all of our infrastructure as code, which we've got about 1.2 million lines of infrastructure as code for the 4 of us. Our SRE team really focuses on pipelining. So ADO pipelining, automation, how do we package code and get code into a container, or how do we get code to our monolith? And that's kind of their main focus. We spend all of our time together. We're separate teams, but a lot of the time we do cross things. But if you're looking for that type of thing, that's kind of the separation there.
Yeah, well said. Important to note, I didn't really touch on this, but Thor mentioned the monolith. That is kind of our focus here. That is the Buildertrend product is much the same as it was many, many years ago when we were founded. We're starting to break pieces of it off, more service-based rather than monolithic. And so that's kind of what we're trying to focus on today is hopefully it resonates with many of you that have, sort of legacy applications, and how you might be able to get that into something serverless like Cloud Run.
And I'll say one other thing about the team. One thing different, the culture that we've created is every single person on our infrastructure team does infrastructure as code. So we don't point and click anything. Our DBAs deploy hosted databases, even our Linux, SQL and Linux databases, everything is infrastructure as code. And like our database teams actually do some of the networking pieces also. And our data engineering team that's not in here, the same thing. Our culture is cloud native, all code native. So that I think that's important for people, especially that are in Google Cloud Platform, since Terraform is very native to Google. But that's how we do what we do with a small amount of people. So,
yeah.
Did you hit record?
No, you did? We're recording the session, everyone. So thanks, John. Yeah. Here's a little snippet of our infrastructure. We don't have to review everything, but just to kind of understand the scope, we have 3 monolithic platforms. We're talking about one of them today, which is Buildertrend, and the others were through acquisitions. 60, databases, 11 services. When we build new services, we go cloud native, as Thor mentioned. So we're pushing out containerization for everything new. And then the hard part is how do we modernize our monolithic application in the context of all of this. So the cloud engineers and SREs are not just managing one component; they're also managing the full scale of Google Cloud, including other consumers within the business. So data engineering, for example. So Thor.
So I thought it'd be interesting just to show you guys. So back in 2016, when we decided to go with Google Cloud Platform, this is kind of the why Google Cloud Platform for those of you that aren't using it. And for those of you that aren't using every piece of Google Cloud Platform, this kind of speaks to it too. So in 2016, we did a presentation of why Google. And at that time, I think there were like 10 services in Google Cloud Platform. So, I mean, you could use storage, compute, and App Engine, and that was about it. So I just thought it'd be interesting for you guys to see, like, with two of us, it was only two of us. We didn't have an infrastructure team at that time. So we had a database engineer and a cloud engineer, and we did all the migrations. We had a part-time DBA who's a firefighter that helped too. But yeah, I mean, I went back through the presentation and we met, like, where we're at now is where we wanted to be. We talked about containers back then. We always wanted to get to that point, and that's actually where Google Cloud Platform has brought us. So I thought it'd be funny to just kind of show you guys what, where we actually started in 2016. You know, anything to say there?
Well, I mean, the timeline is important.
Yeah.
In a matter of 3 months, we migrated out of a colo here in Omaha.
Yeah, and we actually did it with 6 minutes of planned downtime. That's a full SQL migration, that's full app migration, that's all of, how many files did we have at that time?
400 million.
400 million files, so that we host, that's the biggest part of our platform. And some of those were on premises, on a NAS in our office. So like we like, that was our experience. We went from like duct tape and soup to actually like, wow. And part of our decision there, I'd just say, and when we talked about Cloud Run, is simplicity. With two people, we got in, we needed a simple interface and we needed a simple way to monitor things. So just wanted to kind of point that out, especially when you're talking to people about.
Yeah. So just a little bit of timeline there. Yeah. So we talked about 2016 here was Thor and I. We had 3 web servers, 2 servers that did file handling for us, and 2 physical file servers. That all migrated up into GCP, lift and shift. And then, going from 2022 to 2025, 11 engineers, 15 engineers, we're continuing to grow the team. We're up to, we were running 16 physical VMs, virtual VMs, but physically in GCP. So classic deployments, pushing code out to them. We use Octopus Deploy on those virtual machines. We were running blue and green, so we actually had 2 sets. And we just use traffic routing with the load balancing in GCP to switch traffic between code bases. Kind of moving forward to today where that monolith, instead of doing code deployments physically on every server, we're actually packaging it up into an image now. And then that image, we push out to our test environment for automated testing and QA. And if they certify that image, which is a GCP compute engine image, we actually promoted up the environments and just tell, GCP, we use managed instance groups, say, hey, go ahead and spin up servers using this image. And that gives us like full, trust in that we don't have a code deployment problem physically, since, Octopus is actually copying files down and unzipping them and doing all this work. We know that the agents and the OS patch levels, everything is consistent across our environments. And that's working really, really well for us. And this is all because this image-based deployment process, because we can't containerize our app quite yet.
And I would say that Cloud Run, believe it or not, is what actually motivated us to get to that point. Because once we started, we'll talk about that next, but once we started seeing how fast and how many times development teams could deploy their own service, like they can deploy in 5 minutes as many times a day as they want, any time of the day. We were deploying a lot less on our monolith. And we were like, well, how do we get to be more, even our monolith, how do we get to be more like Cloud Run? So like our monolith, we deploy 7 times a day now. Last year, we're lucky if we could get 5 times a week. So we literally we're deploying code 7 times was the max we did 2 weeks ago. So just, that was our motivating factor, I think, was Cloud Run, where we saw, oh my gosh, if we could just at least try to emulate that in our, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Any questions with that so far?
Is it worthwhile to kind of briefly talk about like what Cloud Run is?
Okay.
You got, okay, good, sorry.
Well, because I also want to kind of show.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
but yeah, we can talk as a group, but that is kind of the thing. If unless you want to.
As a presenter with an audience asking the question, I would say that is a great question, Alex.
If it wasn't me, you would have said that. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, so. So yeah, at this point, I'm kind of going to turn it over to Thor really to talk about Cloud Run. You know, why are we wanting to go there? We could do Kubernetes. We can run containers on virtual machines, sort of classically if we want, so why Cloud Run? Thor is going to touch on kind of that. He's already mentioned it a little bit with the pipelines. We can actually template. We use Azure DevOps for all of our source control as well as pipelining at the moment. They can pretty much template a pipeline and give it out to dev teams. And you just point to different Cloud Run instances and different, containers in the registry, and then push it up to ADO and say, go ahead and run this. So it's pretty quick onboarding for dev teams, and they just have to focus on, building their containers. So networking as well, we'll touch on, and the developer experience kind of goes hand in hand with all of that. Our goal is to enable our development teams as much as we can, right up here.
Do you have a separate DevX team? I noticed you didn't have like DevX engineers, at least on your first slide.
Yeah, so right now it's that team that we talked about. And then how many engineers do we have now on the dev side?
160.
Yeah, so about 160, developers.
But I mean, like engineers who so you don't have any engineers who are 100% dedicated to development or experience. Oh,
Correct.
okay.
So our dev teams are split up into crews and stuff, and so they may have, they may be a back-end team or maybe a front-end team, and those that cross the lines will have UX experts and.
But if you're talking
customer
about
experience,
just developer experience, like the developers themselves,
no.
that is what our SREs and cloud engineers together.
Oh, they are.
So like, yeah, and so you want me to jump in
No,
here?
go ahead.
So
Yeah.
I guess it's a good starting point before I go exactly to why Cloud Run. So our big focus from an infrastructure team has really changed to developer experience. How can we make our developers super efficient? How can we get out of their way? And how do we provide them what they need to be able to write code, get in a container and get it deployed? So those are our customers. So when we look at, go ahead.
Hey, just like you're getting developers happier and just letting them code faster. So are you guys like trying to implement something like, have you heard of Coder? Like Coder? as a
Coder?
tool?
I have not.
It's like
heard of Coder.
GitHub code spaces.
Okay.
I've heard of that too. That's what I think of when you say getting developers to go faster.
Yeah.
If they just, I would have just like either click a button and then their code space is up and running and they could just start working. Is that what you're doing?
No, well, so I'll tell you let me step back here. So kind of what you're saying there, we haven't gotten fully into Cloud Run because of our monolith. So for our developers, they do run everything containerized locally on their machine. That has allowed us to do that. There are a lot of Google emulators that we use. So we use sub emulation and those things. Their experience on their local machine is pretty good. I would say we still do that with scripted. From a Google Cloud Platform perspective, and we have some Cloud Run stuff in it, we actually have ephemeral environments, we call. So we spin up 160 ephemeral environments a day. So every PR that comes in, so pull request comes in, it actually spins up a whole Buildertrend platform that has all the services and our third-party services connected to it, dedicated to that one PR for that one developer. So they can actually isolate their code change into our monolith and connect into our services and our third-party services there. But from a developer experience perspective, I guess our thing is to make their ecosystem very easy to use, not only from how can I take something I know is running on a container and actually get it into production without having to wait for an SRE team to deploy that code. Or can my QA deploy it? So that's kind of there. So when we decided on Cloud Run, we actually looked at Kubernetes. We have a Kubernetes platform for one of our platforms. And there's a lot that goes into it. When you have a 4-man cloud engineering team and you start talking about, let's go deploy Kubernetes, even if it's GKE, right? You still have to understand IP space, backplanes, like how are we going to do all the networking that goes along with it? How are we going to grow our clusters? Are we going to auto grow them? How are we going to update them? How are we going to care and feed for them, right? And I think that piece is really daunting to, one, people that don't know Kubernetes. And two, it's still a lot of work. Like our goal was to get away from the monolith, get away from the servers. And we're as close to that now as we've ever been because of the way we're doing image-based deployment. And I said that's based on Cloud Run. So what is Cloud Run? I keep talking about Cloud Run. It really is Kubernetes completely extracted. So from my perspective, in the back end, Alex can talk more about what really is happening back there. But you get all of the benefits, almost all the benefits of Kubernetes, but you're actually, here's a container, go run it. And so Cloud Run, not only does it allow you to take container workloads and create a service, you can easily tie them into using Google's load balancers to actually deploy multiple services easily through one load balancer. And that's not only the best part for us when we looked at how do we help the developer. Well, we create standardized pipelines. So when we looked at Cloud Run, we said, well, Cloud Run's really easy now. So how can we standardize the rest of our process? That's kind of moves into the total engineering approach change, right? So any questions about what Cloud Run is? Cloud Run is really a container, will run your containers for you. And it does piping for you pretty easily to talk to the local network, to talk to other services you run in Cloud Run. Does anybody have a question about what that piece is? And I will tell you that for the Kubernetes guys, you can actually take your Kubernetes manifest and pop it into Cloud Run with very, very few changes. You can deploy your containers into Cloud Run. Vice versa, you can actually, when you use Cloud Run, and we're going to launch into Cloud Run, just 1 second, real quick. And so we'll launch into Cloud Run, but you can deploy in the console, you can deploy with YAML, or you can deploy with G-Cloud. And so we'll take a look at what that looks like. But you can take that YAML from Cloud Run, throw it into Kubernetes and do a deployment. So you have compatibility there.
Yeah, question. So have you done any cost analysis for, between Kubernetes, like let's say that namespace and then the cloud name?
Actually, we only have one Kubernetes cluster. I will tell you, like, when we look at our Cloud Run bill compared to the rest of our bill, it's pretty awesome. Cloud Run, I mean, especially since you only pay for what you use. Now, all of our workloads, and I'll just talk a little bit more about Cloud Run, we like to have hot workloads out there. So any of our services that are 14, we always have 2 hot containers out there so we don't have cold starts. We're still a .NET shop. Even though our containers run Linux, we're C#, and things don't start up that fast because of our code. So we have to pay attention to that. We need hot workloads. We can't just scale down to 0. But what's wild is on our services, another good thing about Cloud Run is you can auto scale up to 1,000 containers per service, but then at night you're running 2. So we have seen for our services, the costs go way down. And when we get to the point where we're not paying for Windows licensing in our monolith anymore, that is going to be a big piece. But our workloads are not always, and then you can do that with MIGs and stuff also. You can auto scale your MIGs, but you're still always paying for a full $250 server a month versus a $2 container. So
for those not familiar with GCP as much, is there a analogous, like AWS service to Cloud Run?
So I can't speak. I know AWS does have a container service. I can't remember what it's called.
Yes.
Yeah, because then Azure also has their container service that they can run. And then they also have hosted Kubernetes where you can spin up Kubernetes clusters. The nice thing about Cloud Run is you don't even know what it's running in. I mean, it's just there. And when you look at it, It's nice and simple.
Yeah.
Like that's, again, that's especially a small team. You had a question in the back again?
Yeah, I was just curious because you said .NET and then I'm thinking Azure instead of GCP. So is there a reason why?
Yeah, so we can talk, if you're interested, we can talk, I can show you the whole 2016 deck, actually. When it comes to speed, when we looked for a cloud platform, we actually looked at Azure, AWS, Google, and CenturyLink Cloud. And I think one other company that's no longer a cloud company, SharePoint's cloud, yeah. So CenturyLink had a cloud thing that they were gonna release that was actually VMware automation on the back end, but it was really fast. So believe it or not, we decided Google Cloud Platform because not only was our database performance, all of our network performance, and everything that we could throw out from a SQL workload, couldn't beat it anywhere. We actually got to the point where we were outrunning our backups. So we had to slow down our SQL backups, so.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think the important thing to note, in 2016, we were talking about virtual machines for everything, for our database servers, our app servers. And so it was a lift and shift into a cloud provider. And if anybody's been in multiple clouds, GCP, I mean, I hear feedback going both ways, but GCP is arguably the easiest to navigate. You don't get lost in the Azure panes that are sliding across, and AWS is like, menu of everything.
And at that time, it was 33% of the cost of any other cloud platform. So at that point, John's very, very early on at Buildertrend, but when John and I were talking about how much we had to spend everything for our building and all of our environments in Google Cloud Platform had to be less than $27,000 a month. That included our building, networking, everything in our building, all of our platforms. I wish we spent that still, but we don't. But so we had no choice from a monetary perspective, really. But that wasn't why we made the decision for Google. But at that time, Google was one cheaper.
It might be different today if we were starting a new company, containers full on and not worrying about sort of legacy VMs and stuff like that. But
You'd be bench testing different services.
completely different.
Yeah, it would be a different.
Yeah.
So drop back to Cloud Run because I guess the other thing I want to touch on is Cloud Run allowed us to actually also define how we're doing our services. We actually do a dedicated project for each service. That's where our Cloud Run instances run to, and we standardize on our networking. So I think one of the important things is when you're breaking away from a monolith and we're talking about using Cloud Run, you still have to think about, how am I going to do connectivity in my service? How am I going to do networking? Am I going to run all of my Cloud Run services in one project, which doesn't have you isolated? Or am I going to run a project for each service? And so what a lot of people will do, and we actually made a mistake, and when we started doing services, is they decide, well, we're going to have one project and it's going to have all of our services. So as we break things up, we're going to put them in there. And then you start to realize like, oh man, there's no isolation there. Like there's isolation, the container's isolated, but I'm still on the same network and I'm still having to do this. So
Well, even if you break up the network, you
Yeah.
run into quota limits.
yeah, you run into quota limits and you actually run into all sorts of things when it comes down to it. So the one thing Cloud Run really helped us do too, and I keep going back to it, but I do love the product. We standardize and we actually have a project. So when we do new services with Cloud Run, we stamp a project out that has an identical network. All of our services have their own network and we don't peer anything. We actually decided to go with what Google's going to on how they provide their services. We are 100% private service connect to all the communications between our services. That's something we can talk about later if anybody's interested in that. But Cloud Run, we stamp out things now. So we standardize pipelines, standardize on Cloud Run, standardize on how we do our network. And so it used to be, it might take us, probably take us 4 weeks to spin up a service if we had something new. So the cloud engineering team can stand up a service soup to nuts, including having all of the pipelines in about an hour and a half, all 3 environments.
With a Hello World.
with a Hello World Cloud Run app, and now we can hand that off to a team of developers. They can actually be deploying code by the end of the day with live in 3 environments. So the way we do things with our services with Cloud Run is we have a test project, a sandbox project, we have a prod project. And once they, for our services, once they test locally in their container, they're actually able to, their QA puts it into test. Their QA tests in that environment and deploys all the way up through prod as many times a day as they want. And our services deploy in about 5 minutes or less, depending on which thing it is. So I don't know if you guys are interested, I wouldn't mind showing you like just interface wise. And for those of you who is using Cloud Run in here. So a few people, like when I say it's simple, like we can drop into here and within about 3 minutes, if it'll take me longer, the old man I am, to figure out PowerPoint.
Presentation.
That's what I was gonna do. Did I lose it yet? The old man, but so setting. And I just need to share it. All right, so we talked about, for those of you who aren't using Cloud Run and who aren't using or who aren't using Google specifically, the interface is really simple. And like people say, well, that's really simple. You're just showing me your development project with a bunch of Cloud Run functions and some Cloud Run containers. Well, that's all there is to it. Like we can show it. I can show you the monitoring in that, but to deploy a container in the GUI, we're going to deploy Hello World container in no time. So you want to do that?
Trying to know you do it.
You want me to do it? Oh, you're fine. So can you guys see it enough? Well, that's my computer's goofy. So this is GUI. And like I said, you can deploy it in YAML. You can deploy it G-Cloud. And everything is a manifest. So if you want local networking, and I'll show you that too. So let's just deploy a quick service. And you have options. And then just to put it out there, it was announced at Google Next. There's no documentation out there yet, but they say it's coming. It's going to be the workloads. So right now you actually have Cloud Run running containers. You've got Cloud Run functions. That is something that you guys should explore. Now with V2, it turns into Cloud Run container anyways. And then you have the workloads that are coming up, which is where they're kind of headless. Your background jobs, think of a Kafka processor, a PubSub processor. And then you also have Cloud Run jobs. And so we haven't gotten into Cloud Run jobs at all real quick here. You want to deploy that real quick while I'm talking?
Which one?
Just do a Hello World. You can just do, is it Hello Dash World?
No, just click that sample container.
Oh, it's,
Bam.
yeah. So, and in here, just so you guys know, with Cloud Run, you can do both. You used to have, you can go native on the network, meaning your containers will actually pull IPs from your VPC. So it's direct VPC, or you can do a VPC connector, which you create a different IP space. But it pulls Google IPs that you don't even get to see. So you can really protect what you want, or do you want them running natively?
Do
So,
you want to talk about anything in here or not?
so really what it comes down to is like anywhere else in Google, where you're going, you have this is somewhat new, the IAM authentication. So you do have full security. You can actually decide. One of the most important things, scroll down to like the networking piece. Oh, let's talk here, auto scaling. So how many instances do you want, minimum or maximum? So you can set your thresholds. And so it will do auto scaling. One thing that I think is a gotcha for a lot of people in the regular Cloud Run is your auto scaling is based on CPU. And the default is 60%. So that means that if your app needs to scale on something other than CPU, you have a couple of other knobs. One is max requests. So default is 80 requests a second. You can go up to 1,000 requests a second per container. That will scale based on that, but most people don't do it based on requests. They do it based on CPU. So just know that that's another knob. You have a few knobs to turn to tweak your app based upon what your code is doing. But again, if you don't ever go past 60% and you have a huge queue depth, you may have a slow app, right? So you want to look at those types. But internal traffic only or all traffic, when you do internal traffic, you can actually do internal traffic with external load balancers. So say, okay, I only has to come through a load balancer, a Google load balancer, or it can go directly to the URL that we'll show you when it's done internally, or an internal load balancer, or you can do all. And then that's the same you're gonna have for any type of setting. And all of those settings, like I said, you can do in YAML and all those. Manual auto scaling is new. You can read about the use cases there, or I can talk to you later about it. So if you go down to networking real quick, just want to show them that in your networking, you can select how you want things. And there should be connected network. Yeah, so the other thing I think that is really awesome here, so Cloud Run, really simple to mount storage. Natively, Cloud Run is supposed to be stateless, right? My container is going to do its thing. I'll give you an example. We have a bunch of R apps in our data engineering department, and they were like, well, we want people to spin up containers, and every time so we set one max connection per container, so somebody comes in, container spins up, they're going to do their reports. Well, they need storage. So we actually spun up Google File Store. You can also do it from a bucket. Really, really simple to mount volumes from here or in your manifest. So it's pretty cool. And then all of your containers have access to that. And then so you can add volumes and do those types of things. So you can read about it. It's really pretty sleek, but I think it's a really powerful piece of Cloud Run too, where it's not complex. And then I would say the other piece is environment variables. So you can define a whole bunch of environment variables in here or in your manifest, and all of those containers are going to pull those. We live and die by environment variables. That's how we set all of our app configs and all of those pieces. So if one other thing, secrets. You can mount secrets too. So not only can you mount secrets as part of a file system so that you can read them from a folder, just like you would, like if it acts like a file, or you can pull them in obfuscated into your environment variables. Just by a single line in your manifest or the GUI. So let's do this thing. Let's go ahead and deploy it, our hello world. And you have an error on networking yet? Oh,
Check that. Fine.
there you go. You blew it up.
Oh, yeah.
We don't need it.
Yeah, I do unauthenticated.
We don't need IAM.
Nope, no IAM. And so then we should be able to just deploy it. And what we should see, what's really cool is when you're deploying stuff, you can look at all your revisions, if they failed, if they didn't. One thing, I'm gonna make sure I'm not pushing too far. So
Taking as much time.
a really cool thing about Cloud Run, just like MIGS, is you have different deployment options, right? So when you talk about, oh, well, what happens when we need to roll back? Or what happens when, if I've got revision A here with 1,000 containers running or revision 500 containers running, and they go to deploy, it's actually a rolling deployment, right? It's gonna do canary. So it'll spin up containers and you can say, well, spin up 50%, that was what we do. We actually do 50% of our workload with the new code so that we can canary it and we can watch errors and stuff like that. And until these are healthy, no traffic will go to them. But when these are healthy, traffic starts going to them and they're gonna actually spin down some containers from over here. And when you're good to go and you're like, yep, we're stable and no errors, it's just one command or one click to actually roll yourself forward. And then let's say 15 minutes later you're like, oh my God, what is going on? There's super slow. We're seeing a bunch of blocking in SQL because of the code. It's actually just a one-line rollback to the revision. So you can roll back, you can actually roll back canary wise, so you could canary kind of roll back, or you can fully roll back 100% even after the go. And you can, and it's in no time. It's really going to be limited by what your bleed off is, like how long do you want to keep the container there for open connections? So that's another piece. So don't only think of Cloud Run as like I'm running this container. It really changes your engineering mentality for how you deploy and how you canary and how you test in your customer experience. And that's what we live and die by, our customer experience. We talked about that a lot, and we took that same mentality to our monolith. So we actually deploy our MIGs with the templates exactly how we deploy Cloud Run, so that we can go back and so let's go ahead and hit this container. So if you actually go this URL, it's going to give you, you can do custom URLs. We run all of our stuff through Google load balancers. So it gets a bit hairy when you start thinking about, you go from MIGs and now I'm running in this Google service. Like, how do I get my load balancer to go to that service? Because I don't want to use that, or I want to have, it's a neg. So it's called a serverless neg. So if those of you use load balancers, it's just, I'm going to create a neg and I'm going to put this Cloud Run service behind it. You can have as many of those as you want, right? So, but yeah, network endpoint group. Yeah. So it's called a serverless network endpoint group. Very similar to any type of load balancing. And for those of you that don't do cloud load balancing, if you think of like an F5, it's like a pool, right? Like you're going to create those types of things, or just like any regular load balancing. But if I wouldn't have talking so much, we would have had this up in 30 seconds. And so this is what we give to our developers, and they literally then push their containers out there. So hopefully that's helpful. I'm way over time, but
Alex says you're fine.
yeah, okay. So my thing is like, what questions do you have about Cloud Run? And hopefully you get the theme of like developer enablement, like enablement. Like, let them deploy code.
Where are you doing database migrations? Is it in container or in pipeline?
That's a good question. So we actually made the mistake up front when we were doing database migrations. Well, we were super ignorant, right? Like we hadn't done container stuff. And so we moved fast, just so you know. So our first container piece moved into a cost box. For those of you that don't know, that's Container Optimized OS. It's a virtual machine you can spin up in Google that runs a container. We did that before Cloud Run, and it was kind of nightmarish, but we did it. And it's what we knew. So then we moved to Cloud Run, and then we were like, okay, well, database migrations, how are we going to handle that piece? But we actually did it in the original container first, right? So like it was part of the startup script. So the container would spin up and it would start doing database pieces. Well, another container would spin up. We're like, oh, okay, well, that's gonna start doing database migrations. That's gonna do database. So what we've actually done is we actually changed from that mentality and we run that in a separate container, and that database migration happens beforehand, right? Pretty sure that there's not an SRE in here. Bob, you would know.
I don't know today.
No, we moved out of that. We use EF migrate. EF migrate container spins up and does the.
And Thor is talking about for our services, everything that's newly built. Yeah, we leverage Entity Framework. For the monolith, Ryan, I don't know where your question was going, but.
No, not for the monolith.
No,
Yeah.
Cloud.
I mean, yeah, the monolith, the big thing for the monolith is that we've decoupled database changes from code changes. And so fundamentally, we expect developers can push a database change out before their code needs it. There are some certain scenarios where that can't happen and things like that, but non-breaking changes, and then we automate that with Octopus Deploy. But yeah, very much for our modern services that are all, have started in a container and in Cloud Run and stuff, it's Entity Framework. And sure, I mean, you guys might know, we have these conversations quite a bit. Some teams are doing it, some teams are still doing it kind of the old, like container startup.
I think the new version of .NET has a locking feature for EF migrate. Might look into that.
We like to keep things separate now. Like I'm a container should do one thing guy. Like I would rather have 1,500 Cloud Run services doing 1,500 different things.
Well, it's important. So
So,
what was happening was
yeah,
the containers were stuck in startup because they were applying EF migrate.
yeah.
And so then they would time out on Cloud Run. And then Cloud Run would mark the container as unhealthy and we'd go, it would destroy it and create a new one and we keep going through this process.
So I would say one big thing that we learned for those of you that are gonna try to start breaking up a monolith or even breaking up a microservice that's big, that's not really a microservice, is one, you have to iterate really fast, like because you're gonna fail constantly. So like when we moved over some of our API endpoints to Cloud Run and it's .NET. And we were thinking, well, this should be pretty good. It's working fantastic on the local machine until you get in and you think, wow, well, our container connects to Redis, so it's got to spin up Redis connection pooling. And it connects to SQL, so now it's got to spin up connection pooling for SQL. And there's two things that are really important when you move into Cloud Run and or Kubernetes is like your startup probe and your readiness probe. So those are two things that the container says, hey, I've started up. And then it says, hey, I'm ready to serve traffic. And it's a certain amount of time that you go for. And that's where we ran into big time. We're like, what is going on here? Why are these containers constantly restarting? We can't even get the app up. Well, making Redis connections in a connection pool is really expensive, like really expensive, meaning what are some of our stuff? I think we actually have like a 90-second delay that we have to wait. When a container spins up, it won't say I'm ready until its health check comes back and says, I've got SQL pool connections and I've got Redis pool connections. And that's different from the monolith world because that's at the server level there. This is every time your container spins up. So you spin up 1,000 of them, you gotta think that's more connections to your databases. So when you do start breaking those things up, those are the things you really have to look at. And that's what I mean. That's what groups like this are for. Like, if you are doing that, pick our brains, pick people's brains that have done it, especially in Cloud Run, because we've done everything the wrong way and the hard way. And then even in Cloud Run, we did some of that. And we did learn all the bells and whistles. Like, there are dials to change. You just need to know what they are. And they're not always easy to find. And sometimes you find them in production too, because you're like, yeah, everything's great until so.
Yeah.
So great question, and hopefully that helped you. Anything else? Like, not technical, like costs? You know, how we decided to market it internally that we were doing it? Like, I mean, those are big things too. So you kind of pointed like, so when you tell a developer you're going to Cloud Run, they don't care. They really don't. They don't care that you're going to Cloud Run. This was my stuff going to run until you start handing left. Then they care that it's in Cloud Run, right? So we had to do a lot of the cloud engineers and the S3s. We had to step out of our comfort zone and actually shift how we act with our customers. Like, we have to go talk to the developers. We got to tell them how to use the infrastructure. That's so different from us. And now we've changed the mentality that before we do it, we actually go, hey, we need to see you guys are doing it this way. Like, how can we make it better? Can we use Cloud Run? Like, and if we're going to use Cloud Run for your service, which we do now, like, let's talk about what things do you need, not what is cloud engineering going to tell you you're going to run on. And that's really changed, again, engineering culture. Like, so we treat our developers and our QAs like our customers, just like they treat our customers as the customers. And it's really shifted, not only made us way more hard performing, wouldn't you say? I mean, like, we can pump out stuff a lot faster than we used to because we're communicating with them. And I think the shift to Cloud Run is what we learned. This is the first time we've ever handed infrastructure left. I mean, and it's hard for a cloud engineer to be like, we don't have to do anything. Like, outside of doing this, we don't have to worry about servers. We don't have to update them. Two final things I'll say. Container registry is a huge piece. You need container registry for that, but you can take away from the patching piece. Container registry will automatically update your containers to keep your container OS up to date. Go ahead. Artifact registry. Sorry. And that's right, it's not. that-
CR is
Sorry,
definitely.
yeah. So artifact registry, that'll do that. And then in Cloud Run, if you turn things on correctly, it'll actually do no downtime updates in Cloud Run for your containers also. That's newer, but it's something a lot of people ask, like, oh man, do I have to deploy a whole new container? No, it won't. It'll actually update your container workloads. So hopefully that's good enough information. Go ahead.
So you mentioned that your application developers are kind of your customers.
Yeah.
At my company, we have like back-end cloud engineers, and then we have like front-end cloud engineers who make tooling for the application developers. How is that workload divided on your team?
Oh, so from our standpoint, I would say our tooling would be ADO is what we do when we do tooling for our developers, we actually are writing them pipelines. So like our service teams, what we provide them to be able to deploy is an ADO pipeline that they can go in and do what they need to there. We're not writing any custom tooling for like self-service because they haven't asked for that. And they are very happy with the ADO, the way that we do ADO pipelines for them. The other tooling we're providing for them for self-service is we've actually started working really close with our developers on, this is hard for us to get rid of, but like Terraform, and we're a Terragrunt shop. And we're actually letting them self-service buckets and things like that on that, where we don't need a fancy portal. Again, we're like really lean and try to stay high performing. We really want to focus on not a tool to give them. We want to focus on how can we deliver what they want efficiently? And so we had talked about it. We looked at, there's a couple open source ones for self-service portaling like that. And we needed a team to keep that care and fed for and develop and program, where everything we try to focus on is YAML. Like if we can do it in YAML, it's either Terragrunt, Terraform's YAML, ADO's YAML, Kubernetes manifest YAML. So if we can keep it like that, most developers would actually prefer to be able to look at that anyways, that we find, at least our developers. And so tools we do for pub sub and those types of things, we are trying to get away from scripts. Like they have things they'll fill out a JSON file and do things for them. But we're trying to get to a point where let's use Terragrunt for that piece so a developer can do that. We've actually are co-mingling our Terraform code in with the service projects now. So like our developers, we've moved out of our monolithic Terraform so that our developers, they can see the Terraform right in their code. They can see it and actually suggest like, why are you guys doing it like that? You could do that Terraform loop better. I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds like a developer giving me a real reason because we're not developers, right? And that's been really good for us learning that way too. So that kind of answers your question.
I had one question. When it comes to not necessarily new services that you're bringing to market or kind of building natively in containers, but trying to modernize something existing, whether it's a piece of the monolith, whether it's, something from, you'd mentioned like the acquisitions or something that's kind of separate. What's kind of your methodology to take that from whatever it is running today into, your new standard approach with Cloud Run behind it?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that, Phil and I will usually meet with people when they have that idea. So a great example, our subscription service, right? We use a lot of third-party things to manage our subscriptions or certain parts of our platform, so we don't have to home write it. And then we will put a service in front of it so that we can have our own standardization, right? So like our subscription service, that team wanted to break that out of our and that's usually, we'll start integrating with them that way and say, what is that going to take? They look at it from the code perspective, but what can our standard service deployment work for you? Or are you going to need something different? And the things that we run into when we stamp out our services, usually it's like, yeah, we're going to use Firebase for our NoSQL, right? So that changes our standard. Or they say, we're going to use Redis. So like the way that we usually have to change things is we're going to use SQL, we're going to use Redis, we're going to do this. And that is the type of things that we're usually trying to pick through. But we have formed patterns pretty much for everything that our normal projects would ask for. And that goes back to like, communication too. Like we have two ways to communicate to our service to service. Through Private Service Connect or PubSub. Like you either get that or that, you know, you either get black or white. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and I'll add too, like with the monolith, we have, we migrate API endpoints over to, basically, you know, standard .NET, which we, you know, can run on Linux, which is containerized today. And so usually what that process looks like is developers need to remove dependency blockers. So web forms, for example, is a dependency blocker. We need to get off of web forms on some pages. Or in other cases, we've got third-party libraries that don't support, you know, standard .NET. So they have to work away from those. When that happens, you know, for example, in our monolith, hopefully by the end of the year, we won't have this, you know, .NET dependency in our way. And we'll be able to run our monolith, you know, on .NET on Linux. And at that point, we can explore how do we want to carve this out into containers. And so third-party acquisitions and stuff like that, we go through the same thing. And our dev teams, with some of their architects, will go through and say, you know, are there any blockers? You know, we've got services that run natively in Azure as, you know, part of our acquisitions and stuff. Can we redeploy those in containers? You know, we'll put our dev architects, you know, in front of that and see if there are any blockers. And typically it's just, you know, they just got to change a few lines here and there or whatever and redeploy in a container.
That makes sense. So like there's a business, like there's a specific driver around an individual service. You kind of take that, it goes through the architecture approach as sort of a one-off, but in parallel, there are steps, you know, at the top of the monolith that are being taken so that in the future, all of it's easier to continue down that modernization.
Yeah.
Okay.
And anything poked out of the monolith follows extreme standardization on the service side. Like that is the only way. We're really strict on our standards and it does everything they want. And we'll only change it if it needs to be changed. Like, and that's like adding new products too. We'll usually ask like, why do you need to use this? Why do you need to use Mongo? Why are you going to use Firebase? But again, I think that is the piece. Standardization is what speeds you up.
Yeah.
Like that's the only way we can get anywhere. And that's how we stamp out things. So, but it makes the infrastructure group they have to ask a lot of questions. Like we're not used to asking those questions. That's what's really, again, cultural change too, like the whys, not just, hey, take this ticket, deploy a server and give it to me. It's why do you want to do that? And how can we help you do it better?
I think, you know, the stuff that you talked about is really interesting around like me coming from an infrastructure background.
Thanks for coming.
I would feel really a little uncomfortable, like all of a sudden of like, okay, we've built this infrastructure for the team, for the app, for the business to run on. And it's moving in a direction where the infrastructure is it's just there, right? Deploy the code and it runs. Is that a significant cultural change within Buildertrend as you do that?
Significant. I mean, like, because of the fact that we were just talking about this last week, but what it does for the infrastructure team, this is what you guys is it actually allows you to focus a lot more on what the strategy is for the company and for your developers. So it allows us to then step back and instead of doing patching, this, that, we actually get to focus on what tooling do they need and where are the pain points, like the ability to listen. I think we've listened a lot more now because we didn't used to care about their pain points because we had our own damn pain points we were trying to solve for, right? So now we can step back and be like, oh, did you hear Jim say how much of a pain this is? And we can solve for that, not solve for the server that needs to be patched or those types of things, or a better way to monitor what we have. Like, how do we, instead of waiting for something to go wrong, how do we better predict that something is going to go wrong? Conversation we had yesterday too. Cloud Run actually told us when we looked at the metrics, we would have been capturing a couple of key points. We actually would have stopped a thing that could have been a problem earlier this week. Because we were like, oh my God, the Cloud Run dashboard. So just one final thing here. The Cloud Run dashboard shows when you deploy revisions. It actually also shows in the same project, if you have servers that are alerting, it puts pinpoints with a bell that something is going on in the rest of your platform. Cloud SQL, any hosted servers, any type of, so like you can look at I guess we can just jump real quick. We don't have a lot of this for 4 minutes, but,
You zoomed in.
it is like, I'm like the old man, really, I'm just gonna go into any of these. So, where's my menu? Oh,
It's probably hidden because I zoomed in.
oh, how do, zoom me out real quick.
My assistant will zoom me out.
Yes, so like, here's a metrics dashboard, and I wish I should grab one from another, but you actually will see points just like this. Like all your revisions on all of the things that are going on with all your containers. And it will actually put bells up here when there's stuff going on in the rest of that project. So you can actually see what we ran into is all of a sudden our request per second jumped 41% in one of our services. And if we were actually looking at that on Tuesday, like if we were monitoring it, that's something the cloud engineers looked at. If we were monitoring that, we could have told the database guys that our request per second skyrocketed. And then 15 minutes later, we had a bell that our database CPU is up significant. Well, those are the things that when we move away from worrying about things, we're in Cloud Run and we're not worried about the platform, we can actually worry about our platform. What is Buildertrend doing? What's the code doing? And so it's allowed us to look more to make sure that our SaaS platform is doing well, not the thing that's running it.
Right, then what's the end
Yeah.
customer experience?
Yeah.
More of a service organization than
Yeah.
curators of prod, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think, I don't know, Hayden, you've been a cloud engineer for a while, like, don't you seem to enjoy it? Like, it's better than doing patching.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, like, Hayden did all our patching for a long, long time on hundreds of servers, so hopefully that's beneficial to you guys. If there's any other questions, I know people have to go, but there's plenty of food, like grab food. We'll communicate about the next quarter. Please give feedback and like give ideas. Like this user group is not come do a presentation. The user group really needs to be like, what do we want to get out of it? How do we add value for each other? And so let's give feedback on that. If you have ideas, let Nate know or Alex know, and we can make sure we move that direction. And this is not only technical. Like I would say, if you have colleagues that aren't technical, still invite them, because then we can actually encompass things like talking about how do we use fintech for your finance people, like and how do you build through Google Marketplace. So those types of things. So awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys. So appreciate everyone coming. I'll work with